You close your eyes and let yourself drift backward, farther and farther, until the world around you dissolves. The hum of the modern day fades. The air becomes warmer, drier, touched with the faint scent of sand and river reeds. Gentle breeze stirs, carrying with it the distant call of birds and the faint lapping of water against stone. And soon you find yourself standing at the edge of the Nile. The river stretches endlessly, glimmering silver under a wide Egyptian moon. Its waters have always been the lifeline of this land, every drop nourishing fields, feeding towns, and carrying boats laden with goods. It is steady, eternal, predictable. And like the Nile, Egyptian society was built on control, order, and rhythm. But beneath this beauty lies something more subtle. The pharaohs of Egypt, kings who claimed to be gods in human form, were not only masters of land and stone, they were also masters of belief. They understood that to rule people fully, one must rule their minds, their hearts, their families, their desires. And so they found ways to weave power into the very fabric of life, into rituals, into the deep currents of religion itself. And here, in the quiet of night, you begin to notice one strand of this system. The way female sexuality was shaped, guided, and controlled, not by open force alone, but by stories, by sacred rules, by images that seemed divine and eternal. You walk slowly now. Your bare feet press against cool, worn stone. You are entering a temple, one of the many that lined the Nile. The walls rise high, covered with carved images, pharaohs offering gifts to gods, priests chanting, processions of servants and musicians. The air is thick with incense. It drifts lazily upward toward the massive pillars, where painted lotus blossoms spread across stone ceilings. And as you gaze at the carvings, you notice something. Men dominate the scenes, warriors, rulers, gods, and scribes. Women appear to, but often smaller, tucked into corners, their roles supportive, their gestures deferential. It is here that you begin to see the pattern. Religion was not just about worship. It was a mirror of power, reinforcing who was allowed to command and who was expected to obey. And within these sacred images lay unspoken rules about women, their bodies, and their desires. You remember the great myth of Isis and Osiris. It is told again and again across Egypt, painted in tombs, carved into amulets, spoken during rituals. Isis, the devoted wife, the mother, the one who brings her husband back to life through loyalty, love, and magic. Osiris, the righteous king, killed by his jealous brother, Set, and Horus, their son, born to avenge and restore order. For Egyptians, this story was not only sacred myth, it was a lesson in roles. Women were shown the image of Isis, whose highest virtue was loyalty, purity, and nurturing. Her power, though great, was framed always as service to her husband, to her child, to the cosmic order. To be like Isis was to be ideal. To stray from Isis's example was to risk chaos, disorder, even divine punishment. The story quietly taught women where their sexuality belonged, not as a source of independence, but as devotion to husband, family, and king. You wander farther into the temple, and here you find another figure, Hathor. She is the goddess of love, beauty, music, and pleasure. To her, women sang and danced, shook sacred sistrum rattles, painted their eyes with kohl, and adorned themselves with jewelry. She was radiant, golden, joyous. But even here, you sense boundaries. for Hathor's gifts were tied to fertility and family. Her beauty was celebrated, but always framed within duty to bring children, to nurture, to serve divine order. Even pleasure itself was wrapped in responsibility. Yes, women could rejoice in Hathor's blessings, but only when it flowed into marriage, childbirth, and the continuation of lineage. It was a clever weaving of freedom and restraint, a celebration that was never fully free. You pause, breathing slowly. The incense lingers in your lungs, heavy and sweet, and you begin to see how religion extended even into daily life, into private moments. Marriage in Egypt was not just a personal bond. It was a contract and agreement tied to property, inheritance, and stability. A woman's sexuality was therefore more than personal choice. It was an economic and political matter. Pharaohs, priests, and families all had an interest in keeping it contained, and so temples set rules of purity. Priests determined when a woman was considered clean and when she was not. Times of menstruation, of childbirth, of sexual contact were regulated by sacred law. A woman could not enter certain spaces, could not participate in certain rituals, unless she was declared pure. The boundaries of her body became boundaries of religion itself. You realize how powerful this was. 2. Step outside these rules was not simply to disobey a husband or family. It was to defy the gods. It was to risk being cast out of the divine order, the eternal mat that held the universe together. Your steps take you deeper still. The temple grows quieter, shadows thickening between tall columns. You hear faint music flutes and drums, soft voices singing to the gods. Women appear here too, dancers in flowing linen, priestesses pouring libations, musicians filling the air with sound. They are visible, even honored, but their roles remain carefully set. Their beauty, their movement, their devotion, all framed within ritual, all directed toward service of the gods, the priests, and the pharaoh. Even here, where women seemed most free, their sexuality was turned into offering. They did not move for themselves, but for the divine order. You drift now toward another image, a young noblewoman, perhaps. She sits within her family home, surrounded by carved wooden chests, fine linens, and jars of perfume. Her marriage has been arranged, her duties explained. She has been told the stories of Isis, the devotion of Hathor, the rules of purity. She has learned to walk carefully, to dress modestly, to embody grace and fertility. Even in her quietest moments, the weight of religion shapes her choices. It is not that she is powerless. Egyptian women could own property, could inherit wealth, could run households. But sexuality, that most intimate part of her life, was bound tightly by expectations. She could not escape. Her body was not entirely her own. It was tied to the will of her husband, her family, her gods, and above all, to the authority of the pharaoh. You take a slow breath, and your mind turns to the rare women who rose higher, who reached for power. Queens like Hatshepsut, who became pharaoh in her own right. To rule, she had to reshape herself, shown in statues with the body of a man, the false beard of a king. Her femininity, her sexuality, was hidden, transformed into masculine symbols. Only by erasing parts of herself could she step into power. And when later kings tried to erase her memory, chiseling her name from walls, it was another reminder. Women who claimed too much independence risked being written out of history. The more you see, the clearer it becomes. Egyptian religion, so beautiful and rich, so full of gods and stories, was not neutral. It was a framework built to sustain power. For pharaohs, That meant order. Order in fields, in towns, in temples, in families. And order meant control over women's roles, over their bodies, over their sexuality. Stories reinforced it. Rituals enforced it. Myths celebrated it. And in this way, the system endured, century after century, like the Nile, flowing steadily, shaping everything in its path. You pause now, standing once more beneath the temple gates. The night is still. The stars glitter above the desert. The Nile flows on, calm and eternal. You realize that what you have seen is not just history, but a reflection of how power often works, quietly, invisibly, wrapping itself in sacredness until control feels like order, and restraint feels like destiny. And as the temple fades and the river drifts away, you return to the quiet rhythm of your breath, slow, steady, soft. The images of gods dissolve into shadows. The chants of priests fade into silence. The walls of stone give way to the gentle darkness of sleep, and you drift peacefully into rest.